exciting. These stories will be coming from No Sleep. I have 3 sets of stories for you, and this will be the first one. So the first story that we have is This World Has a Deep, Dark Secret. I never thought I'd talk about this, considering nobody would ever believe me anyway. But I'm tired of keeping this inside, and I'm done pretending it didn't happen. This world has many unknown secrets that we as humans just aren't supposed to discover. We like to think we know it all, but in reality, we're really just a speck of dust in this never-ending universe. I came to this realization 3 years ago and haven't been the same since. Summer of 2017, I would ride my bike every night in a small southern town. It was always too hot to do anything during the day, so I'd wait for it to cool down before I would go out. I was still fairly new to the town, having just moved there in the spring. One hot summer night, while I was riding my bike, I came across a house that looked different from the rest. This house was something you'd see out of a horror movie. It was decrepit and had clearly been abandoned for years. Just looking at it gave me the chills. The worst part is that the front door was halfway open. It was as if the house wanted me to come inside. I was going to just get on my bike and ride the other direction, but my curiosity took over me. Being a dumb teenager, I decided I was going to go into the house to see if it was as creepy inside as it was on the outside. Leaving my bike outside the house, I walk up the steps leading to the front door. Since it was already partly opened, all I had to do was push the door and walk through. I couldn't see anything inside, so I grabbed my iPhone and turned on the flashlight. I walked around the house disappointed because I couldn't find anything intriguing, but as I continued to walk through the house, I found a bright red door. I was confused at first because every door in the house was black and decrepit, but this door looked as if it had just been painted yesterday. I opened the door to find it leading to the outside of the house, or so I thought. It was weird because I didn't remember seeing any side doors when I first arrived to the house. It didn't matter to me at that point because I was tired and ready to go home. I walked through the red door and black around the house. I got my bike and rode back into town, although while I was riding something felt off. To this day I can't describe the feeling, but something didn't feel right. As I got back to the neighborhood, I saw a woman standing still about 50 meters away directly underneath a lamppost. As I rode by her, the light shined on her face as I passed by. I looked at her and noticed that both of her eyes were completely charcoal black. My stomach dropped and I quickly rode away, not knowing what the hell I just saw. I just assumed that I was tired and hallucinating, until I then saw what will haunt me for the rest of my life. There was a man who looked to be about my size on a bike standing still, blocking the entire sidewalk. He was facing my direction, and at this point, all I wanted was to go home. As I got closer and closer to him, he still wouldn't move, just stood there. I was about 10 feet away from him when I yelled at him, asking him to please move. It was dark, so I couldn't see him too well. He did nothing. I became irritable, so I rode about 5 more feet towards him, dropped my bike, then screamed at him again, telling him to get the F out of my way. I was done being nice. He still didn't move, so I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed at his face to get some sort of reaction. I pointed the flashlight at his face, and as the light hit his face, I saw he had charcoal black eyes, just like the woman I saw earlier. It was as if it was dead, but it wasn't. I couldn't process what was looking until I realized that he was me. He had the same face, the same body, and even the same bike I was riding. I was terrified and just froze. I was still holding the flashlight on his face while he stared at me with those dead black eyes. He started to give me an incredibly sinister smile and just stared at me without moving an inch. as crazy as it sounds, I eventually realized that this must have had something to do with the bright red door I walked through. I knew that I had to get back to the house and walk back into that red door to get back home. As I frantically pedaled, I could see at least 10 other people scattered outside. They were all standing still, not moving an inch. The horrific part was, although they were moving, I couldn't tell they were all looking at me with those dead eyes and sinister smile. I did my best to be strong, completely ignore what was going on around me, and only focus on getting back to that old house. I eventually arrived at the abandoned house. I frantically dropped my bike and ran through the front door. I went through the house and eventually got to the bright red door. As I put my hand on the doorknob, I felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck. I then started hearing whispers all around me, but I couldn't make out any words. I grabbed the cross around my neck, opened the door, and walked through it, slamming the door shut without looking. As I turned back around, I noticed that the door disappeared, as if it was never there. I walked over to my bike and started riding back to town. Ever since that night, I have looked life completely different. We as humans are just a speck of dust in this never-ending universe, and there are things in this world that we just aren't supposed to know that exist. Alright, so the next one that we have is, does anyone else remember the Saturday morning cartoon HalloweenTime? So, recently my friend Jen has been staying with me overnight. Her mom works a double shift and dad isn't in the picture, so Jen texted me one night out of insomnia and asked if she could come over. Once I got an approval from my folks, we've been spending almost every night talking and getting to know one another all over again. It feels like ages since we got to hang out really, thanks to lockdown and virtual school and all that. Anyway, since it's spooky season, Jen suggests that we should start watching scary stuff every night. We are both into that jump scare crap, and I figured, what the hell, we didn't really have much else to do. A few nights ago, we watched John Carpenter's The Thing, not the new one, the original, and it got us feeling nostalgic about other stuff we grew up on that we weren't as scared of anymore, or that still scared us. The old Nightmare on Elm Street was so cheesy. That movie hasn't aged well, she said. Well, Chucky used to give me nightmares, I offered, giggling the silliness of a possessed doll. Probably because I used to be obsessed with Barbie. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? I told her. Jen laughed back and answered, it's not that bad. I mean, I used to think Mr. Bad Bones was pretty freaky. I wiped away a tear from my last laugh and mumbled, Mr. Who? Bad Bones? What kind of fucking name is that? Jen rolled her eyes and said, you know, from that show, HalloweenTime. Now, I wasn't sure she was pulling my leg. It didn't sound familiar at all. She got a stern face and remarked, don't tell me you never heard of it. Nope, but then my folks sheltered me a lot. No R-rated stuff. They were super helicopter parents, I remarked. Jen shook her head and went to grab her phone. No, this was Saturday Morning Cartoon. Came out in the 90s and always came on usually after TMNT or Pokemon on Channel 46, she said and scrolled through her photos. Here's a drawing I did him once, she said, pausing on the picture and showing it to me. Mr. Bad Bones lived up to his name. In Jen's drawing, he was a tall, lanky, humanoid-looking skeletal, thicker with 4 spidery arms and backward legs like a bird. His face was a mixture between a human skull and what looked like an ox, I think. And his entire body, if you could call it that, since all the I said, going to YouTube and typing in Halloween time. Like I suspected, nothing relating to what Jen was talking about popped up. It wasn't a big deal like Transformers or something, like I said. Hardly anyone remembers it, Jen said with a shrug as she scratched the back of her neck uncomfortably. Was she lying? Was she bothered by this? Something didn't feel right. Okay, sure, but Google isn't showing anything either. You telling me you're the only person in the world who remembers this weird-ass show? I chuckled nervously and showed her my screen. Jen snatched the iPad from my hand, looking surprised by the fact that it wasn't there. Her face was a mixture of confusion and what I thought was dread. At first I thought she had to be pulling my leg. This is like one of those creepypastas, isn't it? You're trying to scare me, I asked. No, this is real. I swear I watched the show when I was little. Jen said, scrolling through page after page of other options for the phrase, but no show ever popped up. This doesn't make any sense, she admitted, and she frantically tried to find him. I could tell that Jen was bothered, possibly even disturbed by all of this. Hey, what is wrong with you? I said, trying to take my phone back. Me? I'm not making this up, she snapped. I never said you were, but this is going a little too far. Calm down, I muttered. She looked at me apologetically. Her eyes seemed desperate for answers, but I had no idea what was really bothering her about this. Let's play some Xbox or something, I suggested. She agreed to it, thankfully, despite how tense she was, and I figured a good distraction would keep her mind off things. Finally, it was time to go to bed, and she hopped up to change. Sorry, you know about earlier, she said, as she brushed her teeth. I shrugged. It's fine. I'm sure there is a logical explanation, and we can figure that out tomorrow, I told her. She nodded, and we both got into our beds, but I couldn't sleep despite the fact that Jen had calmed down. It still bothered me how serious she was talking this cartoon. Why was it she insisted it existed? And a part of me wondered if there might actually be any truth to her claims. Lost media was hard to come by, and if it really affected her so much that years ago she wanted to prove it, to the point of going a little stir crazy, that made me wonder what was the show all about. So once she had gone to sleep, I slipped over to my laptop and did a little DOR search. It would have wider, deeper range than just the regular internet, I figured. I typed in the name Halloween Time and got nothing. Then I tried Mr. Badbones, and that brought up some rather strange, disgusting Rule 34 art that made me want to vomit. I think I almost shut the computer off. Then I noticed that the art was all done by the same person. Maybe whoever was doing this weird art knew something about the show. I figured reaching out to this perv was the worst idea imaginable. After all, the art looked like they were glorifying all kinds of lewd sex acts, along with making Mr. Badbones look like he was a demonic sadist. But I was also worried about Jen. I needed her to at least see that she wasn't crazy about the show, I thought, so I emailed them a quick little question about doing a little commission for the work, short and sweet. I used a burner account so that whoever this ago was wouldn't come find me and click to send. Then I heard a soft chime behind me. It made me freeze in my chair. I turned slowly around to where Jen was fast asleep and saw the notification on her phone. It was like a beacon in the midst of a foggy sea. Instinctively, I pulled her phone out of the plug and checked the notification. It was the email I had just sent online. She was this artist. I felt internally sick as I slid open her phone using the passcode I had seen her do 1,000 times. Then I went to her photos. There was an entire album full of more drawings, some far worse than what I had seen online. I kept looking, seeing all the different dark ways she was obsessed with this character. I kept scrolling toward the bottom and saw Mr. Badbones performing gory murders, slaughters. The latest drawings was one from just a few days ago. The eponymous character was standing over a cartoonish corpse that looked a little like me. What do you think? I jumped and dropped the phone. Jen was staring right at me, her bloodshot eyes as creepy as could be. Those are awesome sketches, Jen, I said nervously. I wasn't sure what she thought I had seen. She picked up the phone slowly, nonchalantly. I swear you couldn't hear a peep in that cold still room as she closed her phone. Maybe tomorrow we can try to watch an episode, she suggested. Sure, if we can find one, I said, not keeping my eyes off her. I'm sure we will, Jen said, with a smirk, and closed her eyes back to sleep. That was a few hours ago. I'm pretty sure she is out of for tonight, but I'm extremely disturbed and scared by all of this. I don't want to think about the worst case scenario and believe that my friend might be a sociopath. That's why I'm here, I guess. I'm scared out of mind and I need some clarity about this freaking show. Was it real or not? Until I get some answers, I'm sleeping in the other room with the door locked. Alright, for the last story, we have pumpkin shoes. A few years ago, I stopped at a pumpkin farm by the road. What sparked my interest was that they claimed to have the most unique, scary pumpkins in the country. The carvings were perfect, delicately made but still strongly scary. Every single pumpkin had received a face different from the others, a face that conveyed such horror that it's no exaggeration to say I felt my legs tremble just from looking at them. They weren't simple jack-o'-lanterns, they truly looked human. A teenage girl in overalls poked my arm. She introduced herself as a farm worker and asked if I knew the true story of this place. I didn't, so she told me. Over 400 years ago, this area was a small village. One day, a child was born different. One day, a child was born different. You see, her feet were made of pumpkin. The village was driving with hunger, as it was common around these parts, so the parents saw it as a blessing. Maybe God is trying to tell us something. Maybe these little feet will help us cultivate the land. The couple had 5 other kids, but all of them had normal feet. As their strange daughter grew up, they started telling people that the girl was wearing pumpkins as her shoes. Something bizarre, but not enough to be considered witchcraft, they thought. When she was 5, they found out that simply having the girl walk the soil for 2 hours was enough to make full-fledged pumpkins grow from the ground. Thanks to her, soon there was no more famine in the village. But afraid that her odd power would be her demise, her parents were very low profile about it. They sent their older kids to leave pumpkins by other people's doorsteps in the middle of the night. The girl got older, and with that her power became more efficient. At 12, she only needed to walk the soil for 45 minutes to bring pumpkins into existence. It was when Pumpkin Shoes turned 15 that things started to go south. Despite never leaving the farm and having a reputation of being odd, she started getting multiple proposals. All the while, her older sisters got none. So with the help of the brothers, who also resented her for being their parents' favorite, the siblings started plotting. They got themselves some sweet deal, which included marrying all the sisters to the most influential families in the village. So they told everyone the truth about her sister's feet. The people in the village were disgusted that all this time they had eaten the pumpkin of a witch, demonic pumpkins. They immediately started the usual witch hunting, bulls, bull crap, and headed to her house. Nearly the whole village was there. Her parents were mercilessly killed by their neighbors after they tried to protect the girl. With no will to fight after seeing such a gruesome scene, Pumpkin Shoes let herself be led to whatever horrible destiny she was going to have. Some villagers carried her like the worst of criminals, while others burned down her house. Then, when she saw the look on her siblings' faces, the look of guilt, the bittersweet look between accomplishing what you wanted and despairing that it wasn't how it was meant to be, and her whole body started brimming with the mysterious force that came from her pumpkin feet. She just walked cards had a unique face, the face of horror belonging to the witch hunter who had incubated it. That's what we try to reproduce here. Go ahead, see for yourself. The teenager smiled, satisfied. Her storytelling was indeed fantastic. I lightly touched one of the pumpkins. It was no carving. The pumpkin had actually been born with a face. Pretty realistic, huh? She remarked. I laughed nervously. What happened to Pumpkin's shoes after that? I asked. They said she moved to a faraway place where she could be alone and unbothered, and that she even learned to control her power after that. That's awesome, I guess. I replied. She grinned. But some say she's still out there. That's why the pumpkins still grow like this, with actual faces. I took a good look at my pal for the first time. Her overalls ended in pumpkin shoes. Today, I passed by the farm again, and the same girl in overalls waved to me. She didn't age a single day since 2014. Yo, I hope you liked the video, and I hope you enjoy these Reddit stories. Let me know if you would like to have these type of videos, but be sure to do Halloween themed videos in the next coming weeks or days, so make sure to tune in for that. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for watching the video. I appreciate you all, and yeah, I hope I made you sleep. Alright, I'll see you in the next video. So, happy